Whoa! Hello there, traveler. What are we actually seeing starts to get complicated? It was easy. It will start to separate. Are definitely not behind that restricted access rate. They're not. Forget about it.
None of them will be able to be revived.
So please, be reasonable. Returning to the orientation you usually is the part of traditional. A stabby, but I don't think. And those rectangular outcroppings weren't. Here is my Catwoman glove and glove. I should have a floating, impossible anti-gravity blah blah blah. Now, if we were to take it, snapshots, eventually, how do you transmit of discrete shells?
Well, ARIA, we've been tracking this thing for weeks and we still don't know what it is.
The basilisk has its eyes on you now. What are you going to do? And at some point, the acceleration is going to get so high that you're going to pass 9.8 meters. Look, I know that neither of those examples were fun. A screaming fish on this side would never be fun, leaving me weightless no matter where I am. What the? We generate our truth endogenously or within our own bodies.
I give killer high fives.
Is it? Is it? This story is only one of a dozen. Okay, good, because it's rock, paper, scissors. Where are you right now?
Bam.
The fingerling. That fingerling. Isn't that wild? Fingerling.
This is good coffee. Oh, I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
Just look at it. Isn't it beautiful? Earth. Some call it the third rock from the sun, even though there are other rocks probably in between the Earth and this. I mean, it's a very large rock that's spherical. It's an oblate spheroid because how much mass it has, the gravity overcomes the internal forces of Earth, third rock from the sun. On it, everyone you've ever met, everyone you ever will meet. Everything that will ever happen, or has happened, that will be of import in human history is happening there, on that little rock. And now, according to the smartest people that we have, Earth, and all life on it, is approaching a sort of red alert scenario. But it's not necessarily all doom and gloom. We still have time to act. But what's done is done. Where are we going? Where are we now? Let's break it down on a brand new Office Hours. Oh, man, that is just landing faster and faster these days. Hello and welcome to Office Hours, a live component of the facility where good old Professor Kyle does some sort of digital transition and allows all of you, members of the general public, and my lovely security team, professors, staff, custodians, research assistants, teachers' assistants, the floor RA who tries way too hard to be your friend in college. I invite all of you in for the next hour or so to have a little bit of a sit down, a little bit of a discussion live with me, your boy here. Look, I don't know everything about everything, but I know a little bit about a lot. So if you have any questions for me, sciencey, pop culture, hair carry, or otherwise, Harry Carey or otherwise, we'll be going through that for the next hour. And of course, over the next hour, we'll be talking about some topics, sciencey they be, of the day. Of course, as you can see in the description and in the title of the video, we'll be talking about the new IPCC report on climate change. You might be hearing that it's quite dire out there for the planet, but we'll break it down by doing something nearly unprecedented, which is reading the report. Now, we're not going to read it word for word or anything like that, but I'm going to guess the majority of you either haven't read it or you've only read a headline. And that's fine. You're busy people. I get it. But we're going to go through the actual report to see what the actual report really says about where we're going and where we are. We'll also be taking one of your comments and questions from the latest episode of the facility, which is about spinning black holes and physics. But before we get to that, if you really, really, really want me to see something, you can try Super Chat here on YouTube. I can't promise I will get to everything, but as long as you're simping for science, it still means a lot to me. Trust me. Just an example, Elizabeth and her tiny human Alex, as usual, with the $50 donation. Alex's question of the week says, how come food gets freezer burned? Well, that's because if food is frozen in a certain way, the ice crystals inside of the cells, because most of your body is water, and inside of your cells is water, and when ice crystals form too slowly, those ice crystals, which are very pointy, Alex, can get big enough inside of those cells to puncture cell membranes and kill the cells and making the food go bad. That's why some food you may have heard is flash frozen. Frozen as quickly as possible to make the ice crystals as small as possible to prevent freezer burn. Neil Hiley with the 20. VG Gamer, thank you again for your support. Kyle Love, hi, show the... Blah. What technology will ultimately cause the next revolution? 3D printed guns. Zach Grigsby with the 5 says, don't look at me, rooftop solar and EV household here. Well, thank you for doing your part, Zach. Killian, I got that right last time, remember. Andy with the Australian 14.99. Okay. Fernando Riviera with the CRC 25,000. Whatever that is. It's pink, so I know it's big. Sounds bad out of context. But with the 25,000 CRC... Hello, Kyle. Been a fan forever. First time chatting. Assuming they're all impossible. Which superpower would you say is the most impossible and the least impossible? I think teleportation is the most impossible. Well, Fernando, gracias for your bigly support. Big support of the facility. Let's pause the super chats for just a second so we can get on to the big topic of the day. But thank you, Fernando. The superpower that I've never been able to make much sense of. So, if you're familiar with my work, you know I did a lot of episodes of a show called Because Science, which was a very superpower heavy. And the one power that I never tackled was telepathy or telekinesis. Both of them. Reading minds or moving stuff with your mind. And why I think that's probably the most impossible, along with other ones that are impossible. They're all impossible. But telepathy is hard to understand and hard to make work in the real world because there's no force, no interaction that would modulate you being able to read minds. So, through physics, we understand forces from the very small to the very large now. We can see what happens at the quantum scale. We can see what happens when you smash protons together at just 3 meters per second, 3 meters per second below the speed of light in our particle accelerators. We have a good idea of what forces are out there. The idea that there is some unseen force that you could be projecting or interacting with between two people's minds doesn't work. We would have detected it. And just because your brain runs with, has electrical signals moving through it and stuff like that, and there's technically energy moving around, it doesn't mean any granola-y sort of aura mystic thing is happening. When people think they can read your mind, it's just because you're an evolved primate that has evolved in highly social, in a highly social context. So you are so aware of social contexts and eye movements and gait and posture and voice intonation and emotion. You're so in tune with that, it's unconscious. So when you think that you're reading someone's minds, like, wow, how'd you know I was thinking that? Or that's amazing. It's because millions of years of evolution did that to you, to look at another monkey and try to figure out what it's thinking. It's not. Look, I know you do a lot of yoga, but auras aren't a thing. You probably have, you probably just have synesthesia. And we have Z1RVONR, as usual, this mad person. And let's pause so we can get into this report today. Z1, I'm going to call you now, with the €500 donation. Kevin, put this guy's name down on a list. What? Use a pen. What year are you from? Anyway, Z1 with the 500. Hello again, Kyle. Hello, Z1. I have a question for you today. Do tell. Should teleportation that works be worked by deconstructing and reconstructing the person, item, or item teleported ever be discovered and commercialized? Oh, gosh. How would the person be assembled again with their memories intact, and could, in essence, someone use it to hack someone's memories? Now, that was a big question, Z, but I'm going to give it to you, because you're a big supporter. The idea behind Star Trek-style teleportation, which you're describing, is taking someone's pattern and recapitulating that pattern somewhere else. And what someone's pattern would have to be is every single possible piece of information about that person's particles. Possible piece of information, person, particles. Lots of P's. No pop filter. Okay. And you're talking about a gargantuan amount of information. And I've done math on this once somewhere. But you're talking about an unbelievable amount of information. I'm talking about like the spin and momentum and position of every single particle in your body. And there's a lot of particles in your body. Now, if you could get all that information, you could, in theory, take a bunch of particles, and all these same particles, and put them in the same order somewhere else, and that would be you. Why? Well, if the mind is what the brain does, then physically it makes sense that if I were to perfectly copy every single one of your particles and what they were doing somewhere else, that would have to be you. It would have to be. How could it not be? There's no physical way it could not be. The problem is doing that with particles. I don't know how you do that. The problem is transmitting all that information across vast distances. I don't know how you do that. The problem is getting a machine that coordinates all of this in some kind of way that's feasible and economical and practical. So, could you use it to hack someone's memories? Yes. In theory, again, if you put someone's brain particles, and if memories are encoded in physical matter and the interactions between neurons, if you change the interactions between those neurons and their positioning and their connections, you could change someone's memory. Which is kind of what they do in the Matrix, right? All right, so let's get, I see everyone else just dropping by. Thank you, Jason. We got to get to our first topic. Let's see how depressed we can get, or not, or optimistic, but mostly depressed. Climate change. Arguably, the biggest problem humanity has ever faced, ever. Bigger than any natural disaster, bigger than any pandemic, even the one going on now, because it is planet-altering and its time scale is vast. It's very difficult. And it will affect everything on the planet, from the habitability of certain areas to population densities to the species down to just the acidity of water. Climate is everything. It affects everything. And you may have seen recently that a new IPCC report came out with some pretty dire statements. Now, if you're not informed, IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is the be-all, end-all collaboration of the smartest climate scientists in the world and relevant experts in the world that put together a report about the state that the climate is in. Now, I know some of you, and I have subscribers-only chat now enabled on YouTube because I'm worried about the do your own research crowd. Now, if you're one of those crowd and you're still skeptical about climate change, you're not going to like me progressing any further. So what we first have to acknowledge is that if you wanted a dispassionate analysis of the physical science that is climate, you actually can't get any better than this. This report is from 190 countries, 195 countries, basically all the countries, and all of them have to agree. So, in contrast to what the do your own research crowd might say, this report ends up being reportedly more conservative than it otherwise would be in its estimates because so many countries have to come to a conclusion and agree with each other. So if you accept anything, this is going to be a good place to start. Literally every country on Earth and their smartest climate scientists saying something. Okay? Now, if you can't start there and you're like, well, look at this one graph. If your one graph is going to conflict with the consensus of every smart person on the planet who thinks about this, maybe your graph is wrong. So I want to do something that we can only do live here on a show like this, and that nobody else is going to do with you. Let's just look at the actual report. And after this, you can say, no, I read the report. We looked at this. We know what it says. And then you can draw your own conclusions, as the report has also done. So when we look, everything's freely available. You can look at anything free. All the data is there. All the stuff's there. What we're going to do, since we're not experts, we're not going to look at the technical summary. We are going to instead look at the summary that is made for policymakers. Here. Assuming a rudimentary understanding of math and science and climate, what conclusion do the smartest people on Earth thinking about climate come to? So if we go to that, we're here. It's a 42-page report. And the first thing that we do is we look at the current state of the climate. Now, this statement is a stronger statement than this giant panel has ever made. And it says, quote, "It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, and biosphere have occurred." So, right off the bat, this is saying climate change is real. It has affected every habitat on Earth, and cryosphere, which is cool. I've never heard before. I'm guessing that's the ice of the planet, in the cold areas of the planet. Climate change is real, it's occurred, and it's occurring now, and humans are the primary driver. This is unequivocal. Now, in science, you can always disagree with something, but to disagree with something, you need to back it up with good data. Again, every country on Earth trying to come to an agreement, and this is what they say. Real, happening, humans are to blame. And if you think about that, that makes sense. Now, if we continue on to the report, why it makes sense, it's as easy as reading a graph at this point. So if you look on the right-hand side here, if you go back a couple hundred years and project out to this year, you can take hundreds of years worth of data and simulate what the climate would be doing without human additions to greenhouse gases. Right here, simulated and natural only, both solar and volcanic. So this deals with the arguments you hear from climate change deniers saying, oh, well, the climate's changed before, and it's due to volcanoes or solar cycles. No, that would have been captured here in hundreds of years worth of data. And you can see the climate changing. This is 0. So it goes, higher, lower, higher, lower, higher, lower, higher, lower. But once that changing itself starts to change, that's the issue. So this is natural variability here. And then the natural variability starts to change. So the difference between the simulated here and observed here is what you get, is what leads a scientist to say unequivocal. This could not be clearer. This line is a degree Celsius higher than this line, accounting for natural variation, which is the shaded areas you see there. That's where you get unequivocal. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, again, we're not going to read everything. But if you look at what this actually means, why are people saying F in the chat? What's happening? Oh, press F for the human race. Well, don't make me think like the stream's going down or something like that. Thank you. Thank you, Jabo. So if you look at what climate change has already done, so we're answering all the questions from detractors. Has it happened? Yes. Are humans to blame? Well, we can get to that. But it's happening based on temperatures. We'll get to the evidence for the human part. But what is climate change now doing? When people say, how bad is it? What is it doing? Well, if we look at these hex maps, these represent zones of influence, areas. You see North America, Central America, South Australia, Asia. It's basically the world map here. And the color of each one of these hexagons indicates an increased or decreased change. So in this first one, a red color means an increase in what? Hot extreme weather everywhere on Earth. Green here means an increase in heavy precipitation, almost half the planet. Yellow here means an increase in agricultural and ecological droughts, almost half the planet. This is where we get unequivocal. And we keep going down to something that I wanted to show you here. So not only is every place on the Earth experiencing extreme events because of climate change now, we see this day to day now. That's the real scary part. Not only are they experiencing change and extremes, but these extremes are happening more frequently. So again, answering another question. Well, hurricanes happen and droughts happen. Well, what if they start happening more often? Because the climate system itself is changing. The amount of heat, energy in the atmosphere, the amount of water vapor, the directions of currents and jet streams. If that all starts to change, look at this. Now, a once in 10-year event would happen once every 10 years 200 years ago. Now, with 1 degree Celsius of warming on average, 10-year events now happen 2.8 times more often. 50-year events happen 5 times more often. Heavy precipitation and flooding, now 30% more often. Droughts, now 70% more often. So you can see here and here. And as this warming gets worse, if the future global warming levels get worse, you can see worst case scenario, a 50-year event, which is a catastrophe, 40 times more likely. 40 times. So, now we get to gloom and doom here a little bit. I feel like I wanted to show, where is that? Sorry. There's a near linear relationship. Here we go. So, on page 38 of the report, we, again, as we've been saying, we've answered every question up to this point. Climate change is happening. It's making extreme events happen. It's making extreme events happen more frequently. And it's affected every part of the planet, every part of the world. Temperature is increasing past what we would be predicted. But Kyle, and every smart climate scientist on the planet, how do you know that humans are to blame? Well, I don't know how many data science classes that you took, but if you didn't, a linear relationship, if you can find a linear relationship, linear implying line, that is one of the easiest relationships to parse. If one thing goes up, another thing goes up. If one thing goes down, another thing goes down. Simple. Simple. Now, if we look at the relationship between how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere from emissions on the x-axis and the global surface temperature increase on the y-axis, it is as close with literally thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. This is as close to a linear relationship as you're ever going to see in big data. And what it shows is that there is a near linear relationship between carbon dioxide emissions and increase in surface temperature. Where do the majority of carbon dioxide emissions come from? People and industry and things that people have done, like raising livestock en masse. It is not accounted for by natural means. It is not accounted for by volcanoes. Humans are the only good explanation. Which is to say, if you say humans aren't responsible for climate change, you need to account for all of this space here, and you can't. So, climate change happening every place on Earth. Everything in terms of extreme weather is getting worse, and it will get worse. Humans are to blame because of direct carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions. But what are these? You can see that this linear relationship tends to change depending on these numbers here. SSP1, SSP126, SSP2, what these are, and this is the real meat of the report that we're going to read together now. The real meat of the report is the report offering 5 different scenarios, 5 projected futures. Okay? And what you need to know about these 5 projected futures is that SSP 1 to 1.9 is the least amount of carbon emissions. Okay? So if we start today and we start to get to net carbon 0 and maybe even start reducing carbon, that is this first one, SSP 1.9. That is best case scenario. Okay. Worst case scenario is SSP 5 to 8.5, where not only do we continue on our trend, but we start emitting even more carbon into the atmosphere. Okay. And the other 3 scenarios are different, are changing the variables of emissions a little bit. But again, what you should know, SSP 1.9 is where we take real quick action to reduce carbon emissions. And SSP 8.5 is where we are dumb and we just don't do anything and we make it worse. Okay? So this report is offering 5 different visions of what the next 50 to 100 years will look like. And this brings us to the most important chart, table in the paper. And it really should have made it look a little bit more sexy, but here it is. This is the most important table in the whole paper. So as you can see, here are the 5 futures: best case scenario, worst case scenario. They have what's the best estimate and very likely temperature increase between now and the next 20 years, 2 decades after that, and then long-term decades after that. What I want you to notice In every projected future, the best estimate for the average increase in global temperatures is between 1.5 and 1.6, with great certainty. That means the damage has been done. This is happening and will happen to the best of our scientific knowledge about how climate works. We will see a 1.5 Celsius average increase in global temperature, which means more droughts, more torrential flooding, longer wildfire seasons, more hurricanes, stronger typhoons, more ocean acidification, more habitat and species loss. We've done the damage. This isn't 20 years ago. This isn't 40 years ago. We did it. We did exactly what we didn't want to do. This is going to happen. So as a species, given that, there's nothing to refute that this isn't going to happen. It's going to get bad. But given that this is what we've done, how do we move forward as a species? That's all we can do now. Okay? We have to accept the damage that we've done. There's no more denying it. There's no more talking about it. It's time to do something about it. That's it. The people who deny it at this point are not even wrong. They're not even having the same conversation. They're playing in the sand, which their heads are also under. So given that we are going to see this damage, how do we move forward? That's where the 5 different scenarios come into play. Best case is by 2050, getting to carbon neutral and hopefully also start sequestering carbon. That means taking carbon out of the atmosphere, out of the energy equation. Best case. Worst case, we're really stupid and we make it even worse. Now, let's start with the worst case. Best estimate long term, next couple years, that temperature is going to double, and then it's going to double again. And that will be an unprecedented catastrophe, an unprecedented threat to the national security of every country on Earth. Water shortages, mass famines, mass relocations of people. It would be catastrophic. The best case scenario, if we start to go carbon neutral by 2050 and start reducing, look at that. Look at that long-term estimate. 1.4. You can start to turn the ship around. Because I use the analogy of a ship because climate is huge. Climate is trillions of interactions. It's a gigantic system. It's the biggest system on the planet and most complicated system on the planet, arguably, which I would argue. Which means that it takes a long time for effects to happen, which is why I bring up a ship. Imagine trying to steer a cruise ship. You can turn the steering wheel a lot, but it'd take a while to move. So we've spent the last couple decades turning the wheel on carbon emissions, and we are now pointed towards catastrophe. An iceberg, and the Titanic, if you will. So if we want to start righting the ship so it looks better in 100 years, we need to start turning the wheel the other direction for the next couple decades. That's how long everything takes. That's why climate change is hard to fight and hard to conceptualize. Because it takes so long, because the system is so big and so complicated. Now, that's the best case. If I'm being completely honest, that's probably, I wouldn't put my faith in humanity to be the best case and achieve our goals and go beyond it. It's probably scenario 2 or scenario 3 where the warming gets a little bit worse or significantly worse. And 100 years from now, we still haven't really gotten a handle on it. But that's our choice. it is, again, to quote the report, unequivocally true that this is going to happen and this is where we're going and that things are going to get worse. We can choose now which future we want. Now, I should say that upon looking at this, let me make sure I've shown you everything that I want to show you. Yeah, 37. Here we go. So from a physical perspective, limiting human-induced global warming to a specific level requires limiting cumulative emissions, reaching at least net zero, along with strong reductions in other greenhouse gas emissions. Strong, rapid, and sustained reductions in methane emissions would also limit the warming effect resulting from declining aerosol pollution and would improve air quality. We need to take action now if we want to start turning this giant ship, which doesn't respond very quickly. Now, I know some more libertarian-leaning people in the chat, or that you may talk to, would say that, oh, Kyle, that's all well and good, but what about my money? It's going to cost so much to fight climate change, it's not even worth it. Well, first of all, money doesn't mean a thing when your house is on fire or underwater. And two, the overwhelming consensus of all of the smartest climate economists on the planet, quote, shows an overwhelming consensus that the costs of inaction on climate change are higher than the costs of action, and that immediate aggressive emissions reductions are economically desirable. If you're so worried about paying for stuff, you probably know the economic term ROI, or return on investment. The cost of limiting climate change problems and damages now, it's going to pay you back so much more in the future. If we let it get bad, you're talking, as every extreme event gets worse, billions and trillions of dollars in damages around the world. Or you can enact sensible, practical policies. It would cost billions of dollars, yes, but will save us from catastrophe later on for future generations. But Kyle, I don't care about future generations. Then get out of society, because that's what society is. So, we get to determine what future we are going to be in. Are we going to exist in some hellish wasteland? Now, when I say things like that, I'm not being alarmist. An average increase in 2 degrees Celsius for the planet doesn't sound like much, but locally, that can mean wild swings in temperatures, making it's so hot it's literally unlivable, or so hot in climate regions, in Arctic regions rather, that there's actually no ice in the Arctic anymore. 0. That's in the report. That's likely to happen in the worser case scenarios. No ice in the Arctic. No ice in the Arctic sounds like something that a sci-fi writer would take as some sort of impetus to write a book that gets people to change their minds about stuff. But that's going to happen if we choose that future. So, what are we going to do? Are we going to vote for people and policies that prioritize climate change? Are we going to make our voices heard through what little power we have, economically, monetarily, politically, to choose and buy and support the things that make climate the forefront, and acknowledge the hardest problem, the biggest problem humanity's ever faced? Or are we going to join the fatalists and the denialists and the straight up wrong people playing in the sandbox with their heads underneath. That's up to you. Jansen Baker says, "Why was that message deleted?" Well, we're pretty trigger happy in the chat today because this kind of topic for depressing reasons always attracts a lot of people yelling at me and saying bad things and getting off track. So we're in subs only mode, and both of my security team, both Dr. Beefcastle and Jable Funtime, they can do whatever they want in terms of banning people. So I trust the judgment. 94 Dodge Do with the 2 says, "Can I get an unexpected beam sword just for old times?" Yeah, thank you for making me say beam sword, because I think the other thing is copywritten. And I should, what was I going to say? Something else. Mahmood with the 10 says, "Greetings from Turkey." Hello. Question: assume humanity is stubborn and won't lift a finger on climate change. What will humans need to do to adapt to climate catastrophe? This is what I was going to say. I mean, even if we have the best case future, the damage has been done, and some damage might be irreversible. It is projected that sea level rise will continue indefinitely for millennia. That's what we've done. That's what we've done to the oceans. And so how would humans adapt? Well, let's first say that I think just trying to adapt to climate change, we should adapt to the damage that's been done, but we should not accept new normals in terms of everything getting worse. That being said, most of human life lives on the coasts. And so if sea level were to get catastrophically bad, most people are going to have to move, which means billions of people relocating, huge national security hazards, famines, droughts. Genetic engineering would help to make more drought-resistant crops, crops that yielded more. I can speculate, but we shouldn't. It's the wrong question. We should be asking what we can do right now. Ian McNeil with the 5 says, "Hey Kyle, I'll be graduating in the spring with a degree in chemical engineering. I'm interested in working in nuclear energy. Any advice? Thanks." Ian, congratulations. Degree in chemical engineering. I know chemical stuff is hard. I took some of those classes. So congratulations. I know that's hard. You want to go into nuclear energy? Nuclear energy is one of the ways forward. If you know me, you know I'm a big supporter of nuclear energy. It's the safest form of energy. The carbon emissions, the reduction in carbon emissions from one nuclear power plant is equivalent to 10 million people going vegan at once. Nuclear is the way forward, at least right now. Any advice for you working in your industry, Ian? I don't know. I don't work in that industry. It's very hard for me to say, and I don't want to lead you astray. But what I would say, just from my own experience doing stuff, find what you're really passionate about, because if you're, or gets you excited, or seems kind of fun, because if you wake up every day dreading going into the office and doing this kind of calculation or that kind of assessment or that, you're not going to do your best work. So try to find something that actually excites you, or you think may not be exciting, but is valuable. And you could, 10 years from now, you can look back on and say, I did a good thing. A lot of what I do here is hard. I'm not going to say, it's me doing this is so much easier than so many other jobs. I'm very privileged, of course. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Most people don't get to do that. But most of the time it's difficult, but I continue to do it because I think it's valuable. And I can square that at night. right? So find something that you can justify putting the hard work in. We have Kevin with the 70 GTQ. Don't know what that is. If you could bring back any extinct animal, what would it be? Cheers from Guatemala. I would bring back all the rhinos at once. And I would have them in a large pen, and I would wait until there's a lot of poachers around. And then I'd release all the new rhinos at once. I'm not saying they'd all get trampled to death. I'm not saying that. They just might. They're terrible people. Terrible. Mickey the Mouse with the 20 euros says, wait, I thought I took care of you after your lawsuit comment on the last stream. Did I take out Thor accidentally? Boss is going to be livid. Oh well, here's some sugar from Finland for the sweet science content. Thank you for that sweet, sweet Finnish sugar. Don't gift that. Corey Carpenter with the Australian $10. Good show, probably. Just tuned in. I'm heading back to start to watch it now. Well, prepare to be kind of depressed, but also optimistic, but also determined, but also kind of bummed out. Ben Weaver, 18. First ever stream from the beginning. Love the show. This all sounds like we should have just listened to the day after the tomorrow back in the day. Thank you for tuning in for your first time, Ben. Happy to have you here. ExxonMobil predicted this exact temperature rise back in 1984. Industry and professionals knew this was going to happen. And we didn't do anything about it. Or efforts to do something about it were suppressed and fought against. And also, people were lackadaisical about it. RB Dune with the 15 says, why do you think Central and Eastern North America have been largely not affected by temperature increase based on the hexagon map? I don't think that's true. Well, I mean, because the climate is so big and so variable, that's why we say average temperature increase, because some places are going to have spikes, some places are not going to have spikes. Not every place is going to have a gigantic temperature increase. But when you average all the little spikes out, you get one spike that's 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius. So just because of how the planet is, how the climate is, North America, Central America may not right now have large spikes like other parts of the world, but on average, all the temperatures, all the spikes are going to go up. Penny Z with the 20 says, what about cascading effects? Can we see the food chain collapse starting with things like coral, etc.? Longtime fan. Well, thank you, Penny, for simping. Yeah, cascading effects. That's something else I didn't mention in the report, is that as things get worse, for example, in the oceans, it will make other things get worse faster. So like I was saying with those extreme events, the extreme events will get worse and happen more frequently. So you're right, yes, there'll be everything is connected on the planet, so there will be cascading effects, and the only way to mitigate that is to, of course, take some action now. Joel Smith with a 10. I've been sheltered my whole life. No one has talked about this with me, but I'm math-oriented. Hey, Joel. How you doing, buddy? How much CO2 is needed for 1 degree change? Is this additive, multiplicative, exponential? It's linear. Joel, so gigatons of carbon is linearly related to temperature increase. So it's 1-to-1. So how much CO2 is needed for 1 degree change? I'd have to look up the exact number, Joel. And I know that no one talks to you about this, or talks to you in general. That's okay. I'll talk to you. But I'd have to eyeball it because I don't know the actual gigatonnage off the top of my head. I mean, the only thing I know off the top of my head is how nice my hair looks. But it looks like, if I'm looking back at tonnage of CO2, it looks like about 2,500 gigatons of carbon dioxide gas. So that is 2,000. So a giga plus 3 orders of magnitude is tera, which is a trillion. So about 2.5 trillion tons of carbon we've put into the atmosphere since 1850. And that equates to 1 degree, apparently. Joshua Barbeau with the Canadian 20. Hey, Kyle, long time. Miss me? Actually, I did. Nice to have you back, Josh. So the question, are we doomed? And the answer is not necessarily. Yes. Not necessarily. But if nothing changes, definitely. What do you think about billionaires moving to New Zealand to ride out the apocalypse? Hey, they have enough money to be shitty wherever they want to be. But they all... But they also have tremendous capital to do something about it if they wanted to. So if they're not doing a lot, if they're choosing to not do anything with their vast resources, then you can help. I believe you can hold them accountable for that. Nick Moore, the 10, says, I actually just wanted to shout out you and Dr. Beefcastle and Tactical Bucket, my security team, for your work today. It's not easy being big brainy brains. Yes, thank you to the security team for filtering out all of the you should do your own research types. Speaking of which, the next episode of the facility, this week on the facility it's something different. But next week is, since many of you told me it would be funny or useful, I did a video on how to do your own research online, and that'll be coming out soon. Brendan Bensouf with the 20 says, how realistic are concerns about high CO2 and cognitive impairment? I haven't seen anything like that. The percentage of carbon dioxide that needs to be in a volume for you to start getting weird and dizzy and not thinking straight and foggy is like, what, 1 to 3 to 5%? If the atmosphere was 1 to 3 to 5% carbon dioxide, we'd be Venus. That's not true. I'd have to look up the What I'm saying is, that I don't think the levels will ever reach the point where it's that much. The atmosphere of Venus is composed of 97% carbon dioxide. You don't want to be there. You're weird, and you're dead, and you're on fire. Nerdy Loki, the Australian $20, says, so because humans are so... Oh, that's not good. Australian 20... I'm trying to local... So because humans are so good at global warming, is it possible for them to eventually flip around to global cooling, or is that wishful thinking? Cheers, you legend! You mean like geoengineering? Most, if not all, geoengineering schemes are so big and so impractical, that's probably not the right way forward. Making all electric vehicles, requiring every vehicle on the planet to be electric, for example, is probably a better way forward. And we have to think about what people are going to be actually willing to do. Getting 7 billion people to agree to do something is hard, especially if it's novel, which means it's new to them. So just buying a different kind of car is a lot easier for people to do than switching an entire thing about their lifestyle. And Solid Dragon with the 10 says, what can I do to maximize my impact on mitigating the climate crisis? Well, you can always do your part, of course. You know, eating less meat, buying an electric vehicle, but to really get to that best case scenario that I was highlighting earlier in the IPCC report, we need to support politicians, policies, initiatives with our political power and will that will make changes on the grand scale. A couple million people buying a Tesla is not going to do it. It has to be like a law that says no more no more combustion engines in the US by 2035 or whatever. Has to be something like that. John with the 20 says, Simon Clark did a video a few weeks ago called Why Venus is So Cold about the relationship between atmospheric CO2 and temperature. It's actually not linear, however, approximately linear at our current levels. Sure. Just because a relationship is linear now doesn't mean it's not linear later. How chemicals and things interact can change as temperature changes, as pressure changes, etc., etc. So I believe it. Augusto Gabriel Fritas Moura with a 10 It says, hey K, love the S. That's my favorite so far. If humanity could outlive the last black holes and see the universe to its end, how do you think civilization would handle when atoms started to be torn apart? Could we do something? Black holes die, but through a very slow process called Hawking radiation. That's why Stephen Hawking is famous, or one of the reasons, but that was one of his big contributions to cosmology. So I'm going to kind of avoid your question by saying that the lifetime of a black hole, even smallish ones, like the mass of our sun, are trillions of years. Humanity is definitely not going to make it. The plane shifter with the 10 are rupees? Rupees? Rupees. Rubles? Hey, show the love for Kyle. Hey, yeah. It has been a while since I heard anything about the ozone layer. What happened to it? It healed a little bit. And that's the changing composition of the ozone layer was what was primarily responsible for a short period of cooling in the Earth's atmosphere, and that's also in the report. But the ozone's better than it was, and that's, again, because of widespread laws banning the kinds of aerosols that depleted the ozone layer through chemical reactions. And similarly, with climate change as a whole, we need sweeping legislation and policies that will deal with this thing on a grand scale. It's wild to me how we were able to pass something for something as esoteric as the ozone layer. People understood that and supported doing something about the ozone layer. But when we're talking about oceans rising for the next few millennia and losing half of species and having no ice in Antarctica at all, then for like 50 years we're like, doesn't affect me. I'm a billionaire. Look at me. I can go to space. My rocket's shaped like a penis. Voitan with the 10 says, why do climate change alarmists, like me, make it sound like we will suffer the same levels of climate change that the Permian extinction event suffered from an enormous basalt flood event? It says Voitan, who I think is trying to call me out. Have I made it sound like we're going through a great extinction event? Oh, sorry, Voitan. You're right. You totally called me out. I mean, this was the one argument that I had not anticipated. We're going through a mass extinction event right now. Like, scientists have identified it. So, kind of alarming, huh? Joel Smith, the 10. I don't mean to call you out, Voitan. It's just that you're trying to call me out, and we saw how that shook out. Joel Smith with the 10 says, electricity is a large interest of mine. What do you think of a turbine with a heat source being a giant chunk of iron on top of a tower? Essentially making a giant solar oven to boil steam. Joel, I regret to inform you that what you're describing has already been made. Solar collection towers are towers in the desert that focus like 10,000 mirrors onto a source on top of onto something that can be heated up on top of a tower. But instead of iron, like you're suggesting, a big chunk of iron would radiate that heat away fairly quickly. And so you wouldn't be able to use it at night. You wouldn't be able to store as much heat energy with it. And so what scientists and engineers have done, and I know because I've been inside one of these towers, 600 feet off the ground, terrifying, is they use molten salt. And the salt can hang on to the heat energy with its heat capacity for a long time, such that the molten salt can be stored at night and generate steam to generate electricity even at night. And one of them is outside Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a different question altogether. Should Las Vegas even exist? No. The best thing about Las Vegas is seeing it in New Vegas, the Fallout game. That's it. We've talked about climate and just taken your questions this entire time. Fine with it. Fine with it. We didn't get to any other topics, but this was a big one, so I wanted to talk to you. Aborachis, the 5, says, does the IPCC report mention anything about atmospheric methane as compared to CO2 and how much worse it is? Yes. Atmospheric methane, CH4, if you see it, is much more effective as a greenhouse gas. It's like 20 to 30 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, which is why in the report, I guess, we did read through this, but in the report it does say that aggressive and rapid reduction of methane in the atmosphere would also help greatly. So yes. Antenna changeling, and just a couple more comments and questions, so you can slow down the soupies right now as we're winding down the stream here. Antenna changeling. Oh, speaking of streams, y'all voted my Twitter poll, so I guess we're going to play Sekiro again. And a spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to do it on Twitch, but I will be on Twitch. And, oh, I forgot to promote something. And I've gotten pretty good at Sekiro, so look forward to that. Antenna changeling with the 10 says, one problem is that instead of trying to make a good tech or food cheaper, politics often choose to make bad things more expensive, and most people already don't have enough money for the bad things. That's why we have to vote and express our political will for things that we want to change. I don't know what to tell you. Music Central Piano, as always, coming in at the end of the stream with the 58. Says, keep up the great work, Kyle. Earth, the rock, will be fine. Earth, the biosphere, is in trouble. The average person can do their part, but big companies are where we need to start to get a good handle on this. Earth is literally all we have. It's true. Jeremy Eddins with the 10 says, science teacher here. I use your videos in class on occasion. Thank you, Jeremy. It's the best praise I can get. Please tell your students I say hello. During a Stargate rewatch, realized an episode used the Slotin accident as a plot device to kill off the main character. Yeah, Louis Slotin and Harry K. Doglian Jr. were killed by the Demon Corps and were actually the first fatalities in nuclear criticality research. The first victims of the nuclear age, the first casualties. So it's a very famous story. Lorenzo Cruz says, $10 just for the Fallout reference. All right, please, let's stop the super chats. We're chatting a lot today. We're at the end of the stream. Cheech Ola, the Australian 3099, says, G'day, Kyle. Could seawater desalination solve access to drinking water and rising sea levels? Cheers, you bloody legend. Rising sea levels, no. It's the expansion of water and the addition of water from all the melting ice that even if everyone was to drink just from the ocean, I don't think it would make even a dent. You could probably do that calculation too. And finally, Squirrel Girl with the 20. Chitta chatta. Hello, Kyle. Love the show. Why is everyone always going on about electric cars? Wouldn't it be better just to have public transport and no personal vehicles, even if we use fossil fuels to power the public transport? When I was saying earlier about trying to change behavior in a way that makes sense to people, in a way that's easy, I think the proposition, both public transport and electric vehicles, which is to say not burning fossil fuels in any cars, both of those will help. But ask yourself, Squirrel Girl, what seems more practical to you, given that almost everyone on Earth has a car and they like having a car? What seems more practical, buying a new car or abolishing cars? The latter seems like it's much less feasible to me. So, but it's not. None of these are black and white, right? We need to, in fact, attack climate change from all fronts. More public transportation, more electric vehicles, less livestock raising, more this, less that. We can do all of it at once. And if we do all of it at once, we can choose our own future. That's where we want to be. So I think with that, we're at the end of the stream. Thank you so much for everyone who joined me. I know it may have been a little weird in chat today. That's because I didn't want a bunch of weirdies gumming up the works of science and progress. Thank you everyone who joined me today. Thank you everyone for your support, your commitment, your simps for science. It goes all towards everything that we're trying to do, educational and entertaining here at the facility. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. If you're not following me on Twitch and you want to see me play video games, we'll be doing that sometime this week too. Anime bangs. We'll be doing that sometime this week too. This week at the facility, I am doing something we've never done before, which is more of like a joke video. Not like a joke. It's not as sciencey, but I think... Tell me if you think this is funny. I'm going to do an official science YouTuber tier list video. And I'm going to call out every single one of my colleagues and evaluate them on a list. I thought it was funny. We'll see how it does. I guess it's not explicitly educational, but we'll see. It's fun. It's a fun little... And then later on this month, how to do your own research online training video. Another Half-Life history. As always, if you want to continue on this conversation after the stream is over, go to patreon.com/Kyle Hill. Oh, people like it. Yeah. People like it. /Kyle Hill. To join the facility, to see videos early, to get behind-the-scenes photos, to get private members-only live streams with me, to join our Discord and talk with me almost every day, even though most of the time I'm lurking. We're starting up another Magic the Gathering League, which you will see me in and playing with my very own semi-transparent Kyle Hill playmat, which if you like Magic the Gathering and you like me, you can pick up this gorgeous Psy-Wave playmat at the link that I just put in the YouTube chat. If you want to check this out, I recommend it. Pre-orders are going now. It's lovely. I'm a nerd about many things. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week. If you haven't watched the latest episode of the facility about spinning black holes, please do so. I will see you soon. Until next time, especially when you're talking about the pandemic and climate change and all this stuff, the first thing that we got to do before we have any kinds of serious conversations like that is be nice to each other. Because along with Earth, this is all we got. Take care.